I don't see anything wrong with wearing man prees. I feel like they're good for humanity.
I tried man prees once.
What?
In college? Really? Yeah.
Riley tried a lot of stuff in college.
You're supposed to find yourself. You know?
He did not find himself in man
Not
prees.
in man prees.
That play a game called Poop Dollar.
I pulled those man prees on, and I was like, no.
Tell us about. I think those were just woman pants.
I cannot imagine Riley wearing man prees.
I tried.
Ken, I'm gonna. What?
It's like when
Text me your size. I'm gonna bring you some man prees.
It's like it'd be like seeing Judd wearing flip flops or something. Those things just don't go together.
Here's the deal. Right now, if we get a confirmation receipt that you all donate $250 to Backcountry Hunters and Anglers, I personally guarantee you will get a picture on Instagram of Kent wearing man prees.
For conservation, yes, I would do that.
Oh, man. Wow. I'm excited for that one. Welcome back to the Prairie Farm Podcast, Coffee Time Wednesday. I'm your favorite host, Nicholas Lirio, with your favorite co-host, Kent Boucher.
Hello.
And your favorite co-host to the co-host, Riley Rosendahl.
What's going on?
I've got a little commitment I'm going to give you all today. Next week, you will see a picture of Kent in shorty shorts.
Start out as man prees.
Well, I don't know.
They're getting shorter every minute.
Yeah, I know, man. What is this?
No. That's actually not it. Peyton Scandridge has been, if you've been following us for a long time, way before there was any sort of quality brought to this podcast, we had a man named Peyton Scandridge who would join us. Love that guy. Now works in the solar industry. Well, his topic several times was about the feral hogs or the wild pigs, the super hogs, as some people, they literally called them that. I looked up on the news. Yeah. They're called super hogs. He said, I don't understand why you guys haven't brought this up. They need to bring back, the people want to know.
I think Peyton wishes we would talk about it every day. Have coffee time every day.
So this year, the war on feral pigs.
Over the last 12 hours.
Like maps and terror to like show
mobilized.
I mean, they are very intelligent. But so next week, we will be talking about wild hogs, at least for a little bit. We got to give an update.
We should just have a wild hog live cam.
Live cam? Yeah, dude, that would be fun.
just set up like a cell cam on video mode wherever these super hogs, I think they were in Canada, weren't they, on the Canadian Montana border?
Yeah, they're in the U.S. because in the U.S. we're not going to get into it. This is next week's thing. It's becoming a bigger deal.
Wild hog live cam.
Yeah,
I would not Google that.
I actually want a biologist to talk about it because it's a pretty nuanced issue. Yeah. So I was looking for one earlier today when I was supposed to be doing other work. But today, before Riley comes to us with his pertinent topic, we've got Kent with the question, a local question.
Yeah, well, I think sort of local. So I think our question asker was from this area originally, but I think he's living out of state now because we've talked hunting over social media a few times.
Oh, cool.
But this is from our podcast listener, Garrett, and he asked a great question, a question that I would say powers a lot of what I do with my work here at Hoxie, and probably Riley as well. I don't know about Nicholas. Nicholas just cares about conservation value, but I don't know that you really think about like, man, if I could one day make this like the olden days.
I think it would be cool. It is definitely a bucket list to see prairie as far as I can see in every direction. Yeah, that's for sure a bucket list. But no, more about like what's good for the earth and what's good for humanity. Yeah. So if returning to what was is good.
I'm going to throw something in here. Well, this is extra. I do this all the time. I think back, man, I just wish this could be like, however, I wish we need to go back to the good old days. But I think that's dangerous too. Like if that's all you can dwell on, then that doesn't do much good going forward because it's not something that's actionable. You can't make it that era again.
Yeah.
And now you can use it as motivation to be like, man, things were a lot healthier then. I think we need to adopt all of, X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
But the world wasn't perfect then either. And especially socially, there were some really serious problems
Yeah.
that existed, not that long ago with how people treated each other.
Yep.
And other problems, think of the medical advancements since 1950, so I think you got to be careful with dwelling too much on the past, that you don't have enough motivation to make today better and tomorrow better. But that being said, I totally agree with Garrett here. This is a great question, and it goes like this. I've always had an interest into what Iowa looked like pre-European contact. Someday, if I am ever fortunate enough to own some land, I am very interested in making it look just as it was when the first Europeans came across that same piece of ground. If you had the task of restoring 10 acres of cornfield from around the, we'll say, Sully, Iowa area, and making it look just like it did in 1491, man, that's where you got my attention. 1490, you can tell that man's read the book. He's read it.
Or at least listen to the podcast enough to know what trips Ken's ears.
Hey, once you're done finishing up The Worst Hard Time, you need to go and read 1491 and then immediately follow that up with 1493.
Okay, so do all of those have to be read, or could they be listened to?
Oh, yeah, you can listen to them.
Okay, because some
you might have
books,
to listen to them multiple times. To get it all set in.
You take in a significant less amount of information listening.
Know what your discipline level is, what your availability of time to consume content is, and match it up. Otherwise, it won't happen. Anyways, that is also free advice.
It's good advice.
And make it look just like it did in 1491. How would you go about it? What seed mixes would you use, and how would you maintain it for the future? Love the podcast, Garrett. Thank you, Garrett. This is nice. We love all of our listeners as well.
Man, what a question.
I think we should have Riley start out, because Riley dwells on this concept probably as often as I do, but he was born and raised in the area where Garrett's talking about.
So I would give two answers. I'll give my answer and what I would actually recommend to other people. What I would recommend to other people is I'd recommend scouring some local registries for plants that were in the area at the time. Mm-hmm. Those aren't perfect. Like we've discussed in previous episodes, that's only what was seen by certain people, so it isn't a full account. But I would go with plants that were local to the area as accounted for, and I would try and be very careful to work with seed that was from the area, so you don't have a larger introduction problem. You're already going to be fighting invasives, that. But if it were me, I'd be pedantic, and I'd go around to every ditch and roadside I could and find enough hand-gathered seed to get the true, as close to local ecotype as I could. Mm-hmm. But obviously that's kind of almost an enthusiast approach to it. It's going to take a lot of time to gather enough seed to kind of work into or transplant.
I would say it would take you years.
Yeah. I would say probably 10 years to reconstruct anything over 5 acres into a meaningful stand that way. But
yeah, I think that's great advice. And I will say this, almost all of the species we grow here, which there's far more prairie species than just what we grow, but we grow quite a few. Almost all of them trace back to remnants. I'd say maybe 85% of what we grow.
What
trace
does
back
it?
to local. I'm saying local remnants within a few miles of our farm.
Yeah, well, maybe 60 to 75%, because we get a chunk from Tallgrass Prairie Center.
Yeah, right.
Where and they're getting them from remnants. But
remnants in Iowa. Yeah, all of it sources back to remnants for sure. But as far as like if you're in Garrett's case, you're wanting seed for right here. We've done a lot of the hard work for you already, and you would have that local ecotype. But,
great point.
I think another thing too, though, that you could do to speed up that timeline, Riley, is you could be adding those remnant collected seed to as close as you can get commercially source seed, right? So let's say you come to us and you're like, well, I'm from wherever that's not 10 minutes down the road from where we are, and say, I'm going to get my Indian grass from Hoxie. But I'm going to go to my local remnants here, and I'm going to add genetic diversity into my prairie. And I think that's a good middle ground.
That's a more approachable, less than 20 years kind of solution.
Yeah, and it's got it makes you feel good that you're adding that local genetics into your stand, and it's better for the stand anyways to have some genetic diversity.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would.
We need to talk about what it looked like at that time, though. So, what do you think?
One point that I think covers so many things is diversity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if your budget is unlimited, don't even think about doing less than 100 species.
Right.
I know we like to toot our own horn at 50 or 60 species per mix, but if you're just straight up trying to get it as close as you can, gotta have diversity. And then even then, I would save maybe the crazy expensive or species that are hard to germinate. I would buy those in plugs later.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you have to round up a little spot to put those plugs in, maybe sedges where there's a little bit of a waterway or things of the sort.
But do not apply Roundup to standing water. That is illegal.
No, don't do that. Don't do that. But so where you could put sedges in, or maybe right at the top of hills, or if you could introduce some sort of hemiparasite with another species that, honestly, I wouldn't get that seed and put it in a mix and throw it out there. I would take your highest, most wonderful highest price seed, hardest to get, and I would grow it in plugs, and that would be intentional for years to come, and put those in. So first is diversity. Second, hooves. Make sure I would find some sort of connection, whether it was Riley or someone else that's doing some sort of cattle or bison, and get a rotation of hooves on there, not necessarily every year. And I'm not an expert in this, but just
be careful
hooves.
not to overgraze.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then lastly, fire. Get some fire on it. Again, doesn't have to be every year, but if you were doing it every 3 years, some sort of mix of fire and hooves and upping that diversity. Those are the three big ones that I would start trying to put in place before I even touch the land.
Yeah. I want to add to that. Let's see. I'm losing my train of sundowning again. I want to.
A few times a day normally over here.
As far as the what it would have looked like at 1491, Nicholas and I, one of the things we like to do when we're on the road for podcasts is we just, one of us is driving, of course, so we can't look around as much. But the one who's not driving, unless it's Nicholas checking a million emails, we just kind of scan the landscape. We're like, oh, you can kind of see how this would have been this, or you can picture the prairie in this way. And so, look at what your terrain features are. If it's just vast rolling hills without creeks and things, rivers running through them, those would have just probably been those really broad expanses where, you hear references of a sea of grass or something like that.
The big five, big blue, little blue, Indian switch, and cytotsgrama.
Yep. And then more of those riparian areas where you have creek bottoms and so forth, that's probably where you would have had some tree lines, timbered draws, things like that, that would have been growing up in those bottoms. I think things like cottonwoods, and I think there was probably, well, you know what? It'd be interesting to know how many eastern red cedars there would have been, because things would have been burned so often, and cedars go up like a torch
Yeah.
when they catch fire. So I don't know how many red cedars would have been around. You hear of oak savannas, and I think that's the one that probably piques the most people's curiosity. I'm not really sure where all those would have been. I would assume they would have been in areas that had a higher oak population. They would have probably been more on like the outer edge of that. So I would think of like the Mississippi River corridor, driftless area, even down into kind of southern Iowa in some places. I think you probably would have seen more of that in those areas, just me spitballing. And then kind of north central Iowa, I think is maybe just the southern reach of the Prairie Pothole region, I think, which was more into the Dakotas. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Minnesota maybe. And so you would have seen more of that there. So around here though, I would say you can see some of the oak savanna remnants around in this area, but also a lot of those really wide, broad hills. And then once you get it's really once you get like west of Stewart, Iowa, along Interstate, what is that? That's 80, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's only 80. You just really start seeing the landscape start changing more as you get towards the Loess Hills, and things are totally different once you get there. So
Well, and to that point too, if you've got a site, don't forget to look for context clues. Go out there during different times of the year when you get land, get your feet on the ground. Look, hilltops, do they have this plant? Do they have that plant? What do you already have here? Yeah. Everybody's in such a hurry to get started with a site that they go, okay, well, I've got 20 acres. I'm going to spray and do 20 acres, Maybe 18 of it's, degraded and full of invasives, but 2 of it might still have a plant that you might not get in a mix. And you're going to be spending money to
That's a great point.
Try and replicate what was already there in the first place.
Yeah.
And to your point on oak savannas are big right now. Everybody's talking about them,
Yeah.
I want an oak savanna. Look around at the trees. You can tell based on the crowns of bur oaks and lower down on the trunks. If it's got a really, really, really wide crown, you can tell that it didn't have much competition. If it's a really old tree,
they call those field oaks or something like that.
Yep. Yeah. And then you'll see if you've got what has grown in from what might have been a savanna, you'll see the lower limbs that were bigger will have died off, but the crown will still be intact. So there's context clues out there for what might have been a bur oak savanna 100 years ago, but has since closed in.
Never would have even thought about that. Man, what a guy.
Yeah. So great question, Garrett. Reach out to us for your seed to get started on your prairie reconstruction. Now you just got to go buy some land.
Yeah, you've got the
easy
seed.
part.
Yeah. Man, we appreciate it. social@theprairiefarm.com. Garrett, thanks so much. For anyone else who's looking to have their question asked, whether it's anything conservation related or habitat related, we'd be happy to answer. You can ask us something we don't know about, and we either won't answer it or I'll throw it at Kent last second and see what he comes up with. Financial advice, Kent. Actually, that's illegal for you to give financial advice over air. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not.
You cannot do that.
Okay, let me just tell you about this thing where I invite you to join, and then you invite 2 people to join you.
And everybody makes a lot of money.
And it all trickles up to me.
How do you guys feel about owning your own business?
It's not in the shape of a pyramid, I promise.
Oh, man. Well, man. Riley, you got some stuff for us.
I don't know if I can handle this. I've been doing a lot of talking this episode.
Yeah, I don't need.
I'm qualified.
His battery is blinking.
So what I brought this week, this is a topic that I've seen in a couple different places, but the source I'm citing today is the Ohio River Foundation, and it's about honeysuckle trees and the impact that they have on water quality as well as erosion. They come in earlier than other species. They grow really well on riverbanks. They shade out riverbanks so native vegetation can't grow. They hang on to their leaves longer than other trees. And then when they finally do drop their leaves, those leaves contain tannins. And those tannins affect amphibians and reptiles. So it's not just like, oh, well, multifloral rose is bad, or, it's got all these knock-on effects that have been studied. Science Direct has a paper. The authors I've got here too. But it's something that I've been noticing, especially this time of year. You'll see it. It's got that white blossom. If you don't know, Google it. All of a sudden, you'll see it probably everywhere, especially along waterways. My other source, though, was from Biological Conservation or ScienceDirect.com with article authors James Watling, Caleb Hickman, and John Orrock. They even dove into how the shade is so oppressive that it may be changing the water temperature from what amphibians are used to.
Wow.
It's something like I see and it bugs me. If I could snap my fingers on every waterway and make honeysuckle disappear, I think that would be great. But
so honeysuckle, but you were saying multiflora rose. I mean, that one I see all the
He's just
time.
saying that honeysuckle is its own kind of bad. Like you
Yeah.
don't just lump it in with other invasives. And
Oh, okay.
It's
okay.
something. If you drove 5 miles in Iowa and you threw a rock, you could probably hit a honeysuckle.
Yeah.
They're just so.
It dominates a lot of our timber.
Why
in
is it
Iowa.
so
and
dominant?
Illinois too?
What? Like I understand why big blue stem is so dominant in prairies. I do not understand why locust is so.
Well, not locust, but kind of. I think does it spread on rhizomatically? Is that the right word?
Rhizomously?
Yeah,
The
rhizomously.
seed is also spread by birds, so that's a huge.
Yeah, they have little red berries
Yeah,
on them.
the berries,
into the really very late fall,
Yeah,
early winter.
yeah.
So the other, getting a call from Luke Fritsch right now. We should answer and just put him on the podcast.
See what his take on
yeah.
honeysuckle is.
It's a very high stem count, so that's what makes me wonder if it spreads on a rhizome. Kind of like I don't know if it's on a rhizome is the right term, but like a locust tree does, where it'll sprout another one up off of its root system. It's all one organism, but it's separate stems coming off of the same root system, essentially. I'm not sure if it does that, but it does have a very high stem count, and it leaves out early.
Yeah.
It's one of the first things to start greening up. Early April usually, I think, is when you start seeing it green up in the timber, and I think it stays green pretty late too, if I remember correctly. And yeah, it's got those berries that birds can utilize. A good way to recognize it is, you know what does spread on a root system like that is a tree of heaven. I think that's what I'm mixing it up with, but it's kind of the same size.
Tree of heaven, that's impressive.
Yeah. It's kind of the same concept though. Very high stem count, gets to be about the same size. I've seen honeysuckle that's maybe 20, 25 feet tall, and those are usually the biggest trees that I've seen, and they maybe get the width of like maybe your wrist when they get to that size. Which would be, Nick's bicep. But
I'm laughing to cover my pain and my tears.
Most of them though that you see are like a pool cue,
Yeah.
for their or a cue stick, I guess, for their diameter.
So if something spreads rhizomously, if you tore on one of it, will it kill the others?
I think that can be a strategy, but I'm not sure that. Don't quote me on that. There's many of you more trained foresters out there that are screaming at me right now. I know I might be talking like a total buffoon right now.
So I mean, people who are fighting it with the TSI, they're just going in and they're either mulching it down a couple times in a row, or
I think people find a lot of. You could mulch them, I'm sure, but I think people find quite a bit of success of doing more of a notching it and then touching it with some herbicide, and I think people even use glyphosate on there. So Tordon is something you kind of want to stay away from because it just stays in the soil.
Yeah, the residue is
basically
forever. Oh, it is so long.
I think if I remember correctly, we had a podcast guest say that triclopyr might be another good option for that.
Pete Berthelsen.
Yeah,
it was his episode. I can't remember what he said.
I don't want to put words into his mouth, but I think he suggested that, and that is another common, available at the local hardware store herbicide that you can get off the shelf. So I think that's one that people use that's way less long lasting effects than Tordon.
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy. Well, Riley, anything else?
No. If you see it, cut it down, or do something.
And most trees will sucker back, so it's a good idea.
So cut them down, then get your
herbicide.
goats out. Bring your goats on.
Well, goats will defoil them essentially.
But Adam was saying you have to do it, I want to say 3 times to really get them where you're hammering them where they're.
That could be.
They use their
and I
energy.
think he works
up.
a burn in there with it too.
Oh, he might.
And I think
it's all on the podcast with Adam. So go back and listen to it. He knows what he's doing. He does it a lot over many, many acres with the goats. Okay, here's the deal, everyone. thank you for everyone who ordered merch. That was awesome. For anyone else who's looking, we're still doing it for 2 more weeks. Backcountry hunters and anglers, over 50% of the profit is going directly to them. And honestly, how much percentage-wise just depends on how much we sell. We just are trying to cover the cost of the shirts and the hats and how much time we spend doing them. So the more that we go, the less time we spend per shirt, so the higher percentage, blah, blah, blah. But merch for conservation at Hoxie Native Seeds. It's a cool place. They're pretty cool. Again, if you don't like them, don't say anything. My wife designed them.
Once again.
Yeah.
He's in the doghouse now.
Kent is got to take off for a family member's birthday, and we will talk to you again next time.